According to the billionaire Gary Keller, we should always ask ourselves, what's the one thing that if I accomplished it, it would make everything else I want either easier or irrelevant? That's ultimately what you want to do, is you want to define what's the one outcome that if I achieved it, I could have everything else I want in my life. Most people, the problem is that they have too many goals or too many desires or too many objectives. Their minds are drawn in too many different directions. Success is about taking 20 steps in one direction, whereas busyness is about taking one step in 20 different directions. You want to take 20 steps in one direction, not one step in 20 directions. And most people, their goals and their desires are all over the place. They want too many things. They haven't reined in their desires. They haven't clarified their goals. So ultimately what you want to do is you want to clarify who your future self is. That's the first starting point of all goal achievement and all forward progress, is clarify who your future self is. Who's your future identity? Who's the person you want to be? What are the attributes? What's the situation you want to have? But once you've clarified a big picture future self, because your view of your future is the thing that drives your present. That's what psychologists call prospection. Your view of your future is the thing shaping what you're doing right here and now. And so ultimately you want to get clear on your future self, but then from there you want to ultimately define out 1 to 3 major goals. You shouldn't have more than 3 major goals. As Jim Collins said, if you've got more than 3 priorities, you have none. In today's world, we've overly expanded how many priorities you could have as a person. If you've got like 10, 15, 20 priorities, you've got none. Instead, you want to have like 3 or less. You want to be an essentialist. You want to have someone who's focused on less but better. And out of your 3 goals, you want to ultimately rank order them. Which one is the most important? If you can't rank order your goals, and if you can't define which one's the most important, then you're going to have a hard time knowing where you should put your focus. A keystone goal is the one goal that if you accomplished it would make everything else you're trying to do either easier or irrelevant. So ultimately what you want to do, once you've clarified your future self, is you want to define a clear, measurable outcome. What's the one outcome that if you accomplished it, you would become your future self? It could be a certain amount of money. It could be getting, for example, a book deal. When I was a graduate student, my future self, the person I imagined myself being, was a professional author. And so the one outcome that I imagined, or I ultimately clarified, was once I get a 6-figure book deal, then I will be my future self. That'll make everything I'm trying to do possible. And you really need to clarify a single outcome, because with a single outcome, then you can create a path. And in order to have a path from A to B, you're at A and your goal's at B, you need a specific, clear outcome. So what is the one outcome? This is your first step, is ultimately define your future self. Who's the person you want to be? What are the circumstances, the attributes you want to have? And then from there, boil it down to one key outcome. What's the key outcome you want to have? Once you've defined that key outcome in specifics, and it takes time to find that outcome. For example, me, when I was a young graduate student, ultimately wanting to become an author, I didn't just land on the idea that I wanted a 6-figure book deal. It took time. I had to have conversations with book agents, with professional authors, and then ultimately after having multiple conversations, I came to the realization, okay, I want to get a 6-figure book deal with one of the major 5 publishers in New York. It took time to get to that point. I had to ask a lot of questions, do a lot of research, but once I nailed that one key outcome, then once you have an outcome, you can reverse engineer a process or a path. The process always comes from the outcome. A lot of people say you should focus on the process and ignore the outcome. That's really bad advice, because the process that you pursue ultimately is based on the outcome you want. So once you've defined the outcome, then you can start to reverse engineer the process. You can start to get advice, mentorship, guidance, and then you can go through the path of essentially failing forward. In my case, as someone trying to get a 6-figure book deal, one of the things I learned after having multiple conversations is you have to have a big email list. You've got to grow an email list. Well, then I had to ask, how do you get an email list? Well, you got to start blogging, and you got to learn how to capture emails. And so once you start actually clarifying the outcome, then you can start to build a path to getting there. And there's a lot of research on hope and motivation that shows that in order for you to actually have hope and motivation, you need a clear outcome that you want, you need a path or a process to getting there, and then you need to build the confidence that you can do it. And so that's basically what you need to do, is once you've defined the one thing, the one outcome that if it were true, everything else you want would be possible. That allows you then to simplify your life, because chances are you probably have too many things you're trying to accomplish, and that makes you overwhelmed, it makes you stressed, it makes you unfocused. You should have less goals so that you can have more flow, because flow is, in order to be in flow, you have to focus on one thing at a time. And if your brain is going in too many different directions, then you're probably doing everything at a mediocre level. You're too spread focused. Rather than advancing far in one area, you're advancing not far in multiple areas. And you're less effective, you're more split focused than you should be. If you want more flow, have less goals. If you want more flow, make meaningful progress on a daily basis, towards the goals that you've identified as this outcome will absolutely help me become my future self. This will set me up in ways that I then will have amazing capabilities and situations and opportunities from that next level. And so once you've clarified that goal, then you can reverse engineer the process, and then you can begin moving and advancing towards that outcome. And then once you get there, then you're standing on a new platform where you can imagine new goals. You then have capabilities that your current self doesn't have, and then you can set new goals from there. So ultimately, that's the key. Visualize your future self, then set one outcome, and then reverse engineer the process, and then go through the practice of deliberate practice to getting there. That's basically the key. And so my question for you is, what is that one major goal? What is the one outcome that if you accomplished it would allow you to become your future self? Do you know what that goal is? Are you confident that that's the one goal you should have? And are you willing to let go of some of your lesser goals? There's a powerful quote that will stop you in your tracks. And the quote is this, from Robert Brault. Robert Brault said, "We're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to lesser goals." So basically, it's not the obstacles between you and your goal that's stopping you. It's actually that you've got clear paths to lesser goals. You have too many goals. We all have too many goals. And the only way for you to really get where you want to go is for you to stop doing your lesser goals. Uncommit to certain things you're doing, uncommit to certain relationships, uncommit to certain distractions. You've got to remove all of your lesser goals in order to start working yourself through the obstacles or going through the deliberate practice process of becoming your future self. So you've got to define your one goal, but it's not the obstacles. Again, as Robert Brault said, we are kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by clear paths to a lesser goal. So my question is, first off, what's your major goal? What's the one thing that if you accomplished it would help you have everything else? And then the second question becomes, what are all the lesser goals that are currently competing for your time and attention, that you're still putting energy into? Your lesser goals, and again, everything we do is a goal, by the way. Even getting on Facebook is a goal. It's to see what's on Facebook. Every behavior you do is towards some end that you want. And so the only way to become an essentialist, the only way to actually become someone who you really want to be, is you've got to start eliminating the goals of your former self, the behaviors of your former self. You've got to remove the lesser goals, and sometimes that can be very scary. Just as one example, recently I had to eliminate a relationship that my former self, it was a dream project for myself, my former self. I had an opportunity to co-author a book with one of my heroes, but it got to the point where it was obvious it was a lesser goal. It was something that I wanted to do because my former self wanted it, but it was ultimately a distraction. It was a waste of time, and it was stopping my progress towards my true goal. And so you have to be radically honest with yourself. There are probably opportunities, maybe even great opportunities. Actually, one of the things that Jim Collins said in Good to Great is that once in a lifetime opportunities happen every day. You're going to have increasing opportunities come at you as you're making progress towards your goals and as you're building yourself up as a person, and almost all of those are lesser goals. And so you've got to really be honest with yourself. What are your lesser goals? What are the distractions that you're allowing into your life that you're still saying yes to that you need to say no to? A really good litmus test is this. What does your future self say no to that you're still saying yes to? That's in terms of behaviors, attitudes, opportunities. What does your future self say no to that you're still saying yes to? Think about it. What are all the lesser goals in your life that you're still putting energy into that if you would just start saying no to those things? That's actually how you build your commitment, by the way. Once you start saying no to lesser goals and fully committing to your future self, the one you really want, then you become able to overcome the obstacles between you and your true goal. You start to break past those barriers of mental, emotional, and also skill-based barriers. You can break through any barrier. That's called deliberate practice and also getting help from other people. But in order to fully commit to your goal and get really serious about it, you've got to remove those lesser goals. And here's just a final quote I'll give you. This comes from the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. The statement from the book says this: commitment is a statement of what is. You can know what you're committed to by the results you're getting, not by what you say your commitments are. So commitment is purely based on the results you're getting. So if you weigh 300 pounds, then you're committed to being 300 pounds. Your commitment is not what you desire. Your commitment is what you have. And so whatever you have in your life in terms of income, results, situation is what you're currently committed to. And if you want to commit to something else, then you've got to let go of what you currently have. You've got to start saying no to those lesser goals. You've got to be honest about your future self. You've got to fully commit and publicly commit to your one major goal, and you've got to define it in simple terms. You've got to remove all those things that are pulling at your attention and just get laser focused. And I'll just say this. I have a lot of people, even people who are very successful, who I know, who are still just pulled in 20 different directions. And it's crazy how little flow they have. When you have less goals, you can have better goals. When you have less goals, you can be more present. When you have less goals, you can have clear priorities. You can have clear values. If you've got too many goals, then you're trying to prove something to yourself. You're trying to make up for some inadequacy. It's very powerful when someone has no more than 3 items on their to-do list on a daily basis, 3 items to do on a weekly basis. They're focused on outcomes. They're not focused on being busy. They're focused on outcomes. There's 2 economies, as Dan Sullivan would say. There's the results economy and there's the time and energy economy. When you get in the results economy, you've really clarified your 1 to 3 major goals. They're very specific. They're very clear. You know that those outcomes will really radically open up the results you're looking for. And then on a monthly basis, you're just focused on 3 targets to make progress towards those goals. On a weekly basis, you've got 3 targets and you're working towards those. On a daily basis, you've got no more than 3 targets. You're not busy. You don't have 10 things to do on your to-do list. You've got like 1 to 3, and you're actually making measurable, meaningful progress on what's important, not what's on urgent. And then you can have more flow. You're making more meaningful progress on a daily basis. You're in way more flow. You can let go and you can recover a lot better. You're not torn in a million different directions. You're not overly busy. You're not frantic. You're not frenetic. Instead, you're purposeful. You're intentional. You're clear on your future self. You're not competing with anyone else. You're just enjoying the process. And you're clear because you've got one goal. You can then create one path. If you got 50 goals, then you got 50 paths. And if you got 50 paths, then you're going in 50 different directions. And the truth of that is that you're pursuing too many lesser goals. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. This is the Future Self YouTube series. And please click the like button, the thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. Down below, also, you can get access to my free peak state checklist, which has been downloaded over 800,000 times. And then on this page, you can get access to the next Future Self video.